right, good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're very excited for tonight's presentation on Ghosts and Legends of Connecticut River Valley. We're so fortunate to have our very own Lauren Middleton and New England Legends podcast be our featured speaker for tonight. She's got a lot of great stories to tell and a lot of fun things to learn. If you have any questions at any time, please use the chat function below, or you can use the question and answer. We will answer, I won't, Lauren will answer those at the end of her presentation. Again, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and I'm very excited. Lauren, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Middleton. I am the chair of the Women's Business Alliance with the Middlesex County Chamber of Commerce. This is the first, I guess, Halloween type presentation we have done. We're all very excited about it, and I guess it's very well attended, as you can see. We have a couple events coming up in November that I just wanted to speak about before we start the presentation. We have a wonderful speaker coming up on November 18th named Mara Davis. She is a registered dietitian and nutritionist. She's going to be speaking at 8:30 a.m. on emotional eating during the coronavirus pandemic and the holidays, which is a very important subject right now because we're not sure really what COVID is going to give us for the holidays, and a lot of us have been emotional eating, and she's just going to teach us how to kind of tame that down and work off that COVID weight we might have gained or not gained. But that is on November 18th at 8:30 in the morning, and you can head over to the middlesexcountychamber.com website to register. All right, now that that's done, like I said, my name is Lauren Middleton. My 9-to-5 job is I run my own digital marketing agency called Forest City Marketing in Middletown, Connecticut. When I'm not doing digital marketing, I have some interesting hobbies, which includes researching the folklore and legends of New England. I've been doing this a very, very long time, at least 20 years. I just finished a 3-year project I've been working on my new blog called the New England Spectre Scribe, which will be covering ghosts and legends all over New England. So I'll give you the address for that at the end of the presentation. I also help out with the very popular New England Legends podcast that comes out every Thursday, going over various New England legends, histories and stories all over the Northeast. I would check that out. It's ournewenglandlegends.com. And of course, thank you so much to the Middlesex County Chamber for having me tonight. I wasn't sure if they were going to be interested in this subject, but it seemed to be pretty successful. So let's kick it off. So our first legend is, it's kind of a legend that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the Black Dog of West Peak, or the Hanging Hills in Meriden, Connecticut. The reason why the Black Dog is kind of important to me because seeing a black dog was my first spooky paranormal experience as a child. I was laying in my bed trying to fall asleep at the house I was living when I grew up, and I looked across the hall to our bathroom, and I saw the silhouette of a black dog staring back at me, and I said, well, that's interesting because I don't have a black dog. We don't have a black dog. I blinked a few times, didn't disappear, and then I blinked once more and it was gone. The peculiar thing was that the day after that, my grandmother passed away, and they say that the black dog is either a harbinger of joy or it can be a harbinger of death as well, as we will go into when we talk about the Black Dog of West Peak. The Hanging Hills of West Peak and Castle Craig in Meriden overlook the city of Meriden and Quinnipiac River Valley. It's very popular with hikers, beautiful scenery, easy trails, just be careful, don't fall off the cliffs. It also runs through the Metacomet Trail. There's several mountains to hike through. And then you can end up at the beautiful Castle Craig Tower that has a great view of Meriden and some of the river valley, and that was built in 1900. So you're probably asking, what does it have to do with a black dog? So the earliest account of the black dog being published was in 1898 by a New York geologist named W.H.C. Pynchon. Now, this black dog, as you can see in the drawing they had made, is not very ferocious looking. It was about the size of a spaniel. You know, nothing bad about it. Or, you know, when you picture a black dog, you picture red eyes and snarling teeth, but this dog wasn't threatening at all, he thought. But unfortunately, this dog is a harbinger of death because 6 deaths have been blamed on it. When the dog is seen, it makes no sound. It doesn't leave any footprints. If it's cold out, when it barks, there's no breath that can be seen, so it's very ethereal. So John actually had an associate of his name, Herbert Marshall, and they decided to do a geological survey of the Hanging Hills in 1891. Pynchon had seen the black dog before and told Marshall about it, but Marshall dismissed it as just a myth. Now, the picture you'll see ahead of me is actually a drawing of Herbert Marshall just before he slipped off that cliff and died. And that was the 3rd time that Pynchon was seeing the dog. And when that happened, just before Herbert Marshall fell, he uttered, "I did not believe it before, but I believe it now." And he slipped on the rocks and he fell to his death. The next day, the searchers found his body, and standing above the ledge of where Marshall had fell was the black dog. And there is actually a poem, well, not a poem, I should say, but this is actually from the article that Pynchon had wrote. I'm actually going to play an excerpt from my podcast about that.
And if man shall meet the black dog once, it shall be for joy. And if twice, it shall be for sorrow. And the 3rd time, he shall die.
Now, Pynchon didn't return to the Hanging Hills for 6 years after his friend's death, but eventually he did come back. And unfortunately, he disappeared for a few days, and his body was found lying at the same cliff of where his friend Marshall had died. So maybe he saw the dog again. Nobody really knows. There's been other people that have seen the black dog. More recently, I think it was in the mid-1800s, a hiker saw the black dog in the rainstorm. You know, it followed him, it barked and made no sound, it didn't make footprints in the mud. So he went back to camp and he told his friend about it. His friend, you know, dismissed it. They went out the next day to go hiking and they saw the dog once again. And unfortunately, this is the 3rd time seeing the dog, and the hiker fell to his death. So it said, if you choose to hike in the Hanging Hills, and if a black shadow emerges from the trees, seeing that shadow 2 more times might be deadly. And that's the story of the blessed black dog of West Peak, a personal favorite of mine. Next one is actually the library in Deep River, Connecticut. I love any kind of library. I think they're an integral part of learning anything. I love reading. And there's always some great history. So here's 2 photos of kind of what the library looked like in 1932 versus 2011. The library was originally a private home owned by a gentleman named Richard Spencer, and it became a library in 1933. Nobody really knows the identities of the spirits that reside there, but there's been quite a few things that have occurred, such as the specter of a woman that walks down the library staircase. She also looks out a window, and she likes to watch the children during story hour, but nobody knows who she is. The thought is that she might be Julia Spencer, who is Richard Spencer's wife. There's also been the spirit of a child seen on the 4th floor. And then people have smelled phantom cigar smoke and heard the sounds of a party upstairs, even though there's no one there. It's said that sometimes spirits can manifest themselves through smells, so maybe the cigar was a phantom smell. Staff have even had their names called when the building is empty. The weirdest thing is, you know, the children, when they're in the children's part of the library, they'll take out the puzzles and you know, they'll put them away, but the children's librarian will come in the next day and she'll find the puzzle out again with all the pieces missing, which is pretty peculiar and kind of annoying. The Deep River Library was actually featured on a Travel Channel show called The Haunted Collector back in 2011 with John Zaffis, who is the nephew of the famous Ed and Lorraine Warren. They didn't find a heck of a lot there, but they think the haunting was being caused by, it was an old typewriter back from the 1800s. So they took the typewriter out and the activity seemed to have calmed down. I'm actually going to play you a kind of a fun sound clip right now. This was taken by the Northeastern Investigation of the Paranormal Society. This is an EVP, which stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon. And for those of you who aren't familiar with all the ghost hunting jargon, it's basically taking any kind of electronic recorder and recording disembodied voices on tape. Very interesting. So I'm going to ask you to listen very closely, especially at the 12-second mark, and I'll let you kind of think what you hear, and then I'm going to mention what the investigators actually heard. I'm going to play that one more time. And just a third time, just for extra luck. Okay. So the thought was the strange voice at the end of the question there. They thought that the answer was George. And they actually found out through historical records that George Spencer was actually the father of Richard Spencer, who had originally purchased the house for his son. So kind of interesting. Don't know 100% if that's actually, you know, a spirit speaking or not, but it's just something to think about. Okay. This always raises a lot of questions, but yes, there has been a sighting of a sea serpent on the Connecticut River. And people have named the sea serpent Connie. You got Nessie, you got Chessie, you got, what is that one up in, I don't know, I forgot the one up in Champ. It's a Champ up in Vermont, but the Connecticut River sea serpent is known as the Connie. Connie, as he or she has said, was first sighted in Middletown in 1866 by two gentlemen that were crossing the river in their little skiff, and they were named Colonel Stocking and Silas Sage. It was a peaceful morning. They were just crossing the river, minding their own business, but suddenly their boat was tossed into the air. Both men were jolted out of their seats, but luckily they landed back in their seats, no problem. And what they witnessed, this is actually an excerpt from a Hartford Current article. They thought it was over 100 feet in length, and when they saw the first 20 feet of its enormous body, it had, one moment please. Oh, out of the froth rose a big black head as large as a flower barrel and with eyes as big as small plates. The head kept rising higher and higher until 10 feet of the neck appeared. The men didn't stop to make a long or thorough examination, but they sure feel that the sea serpent must have been a clear 100 feet long. So pretty scary if, you know, you're out in the middle of the deep Connecticut River and you witness that. After the story got published, thousands flocked to the banks of the Connecticut River to try to gain a glimpse of Connie, but he or she was never seen again. There could be a natural explanation for it. I mean, there are sturgeon in the Connecticut River, there are eels, there are, you know, a variety of different fish. I think there's been otters seen. So who knows? So Connie's been disappeared to this day, but there's been a lot of theories that Connie could be hiding beneath the city of Hartford, swimming in the Hog or Park River. And if you're curious as to what the Hog or Park River is, is there is actually a very interesting river that runs beneath Hartford. It's named the Hog River because back in the 1800s, many pigs were kept along the banks of the Connecticut River. And unfortunately, a lot of human waste also flowed into this river. So they named the Hog River because it sounded as bad as it smelled. The photo you'll see ahead of you is actually the Hog River beneath Hartford. I personally don't think I'd ever want to go down there. It's probably pretty creepy and probably pretty smelly. But what happened was the river was rerouted underneath Hartford in 1940, and it was renamed the Park River to kind of take away that horrible name of the Hog River. But urban explorers and whatnot who have traveled underneath Hartford to kind of explore the underneath the Park River say it still smells like sewage, and there's old cars down there and gross looking fish and maybe even a sea serpent, who knows. Okay. Our next story is definitely probably one of the most gruesome ones I'm going to talk about. It's not too bad, but there is a large area of preserved woods in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and that is called the Preserve. This story goes back to the early 1800s, and it's about a girl named Lottie ENKE. She was very, very young, and she was the daughter of the tavern owner of the Wild Goose Tavern. The theory was that she was kidnapped by the old drifter in town that they called Old Dreary. You know, he was the town drunk, you know, just the town creeper, if you will. One week, Lottie disappeared. Nobody could find her. You know, months went by, and there were two hunters in the woods, and they noticed the figure of a small girl in a blue cape. And they tried and tried and tried to catch up with this girl, but nobody could catch up to her. Finally, the last time they saw the apparition was outside a cave. They went into the cave, and unfortunately, they found the body of Lottie. Her arms were broken, and her feet were really, really bloody. So nobody really knows what happened to her. She was murdered. And this is actually the preserve where Lottie's ghost is seen, or the 1,000-acre forest, and it spans Old Saybrook, Essex, and Westbrook, and it's owned by the Essex Land Trust. But it's said, in winter, if you're traveling in the 1,000-acre forest, Lottie will try to lead you to her gravesite by leaving blood-stained footprints in the snow. And sometimes you'll even see the ghost of a girl running through the forest in a blue cape. So, very creepy. Next is more of a legend slash folklore piece, and that is the legend of the Black Fox of the Salmon River State Forest. And that goes to, I think, East Hampton and Colchester, Connecticut. So the Black Fox was thought to be basically a manifestation of one of the gods of the Native Americans that lived in the forest there. This fox is described as having black otherworldly fur with burning eyes. And the creepy thing about the black fox is when a human sees it, it seems to possess them. It makes the human want to hunt it with this demonic howl, and then the human would disappear in the woods again, never to be seen or found. They would try and they would try and they would try to hunt this black fox, but arrows and bullets would pass right through it. This is just a quick photo of the Salmon River, but I'm actually going to forward one more. Okay. The Black Fox was actually the subject of a poem by the poet John Bernard. And this is the last part of the poem that kind of explains how dangerous the fox is. For people say that every year, when winter snows are spread all over the face of the frozen earth and the forest leaves are shed, the specter fox comes forth and howls above the hunter's bed. So that would be pretty creepy to hear if that was the only thing you heard before your death. The only two bodies that were ever found that were victims of the Black Fox are they were buried back in the city of East Hampton, but it is said on cold winter nights when it snows, the footprints of the fox are supposed to appear on the graves of the hunters that were killed by it. So very, very interesting. So keep your eye out when driving through the Salmon River State Forest for a jet black fox. Okay, so this is a more local tale for those of you who live in, Middletown and Cromwell. This is kind of an unknown haunted house. The only reason I found out about it was I was watching a show and I found out about it. This is the Captain Daniel Rainey house, and it's located actually on Main Street in Cromwell. So this is the actual house right here. It's really, really nice looking. It is currently for sale. So if you want to buy a haunted house, you'll get a house and a ghost for free. The house was built in 1791, and it's a part of Cromwell's historic Main Street district. And over here, you'll actually see that's the headstone of Captain Daniel Rainey. And that's currently buried in the old burying ground in Cromwell if you ever want to go see it. Captain Rainey was, unfortunately, he was a slave trader. He was very, very wealthy, and he also owned slaves. So this is how the story started of the Captain Daniel Rainey house. A gentleman named Max Corbeau bought the house back in 1959 and decided to excavate the backyard to put in a new septic system. Well, surprise, surprise. There was a graveyard back there, and basically when the house was built, they leveled all the gravestones so they couldn't see them. And this is actually a photo of Mr. Corbeau looking at the gravestones that they found in the backyard. We all know how horror stories go when you build over a graveyard. Yeah. Fortunately, they lived there from 1959 to 2009. And then in 2009, like quote, all hell broke loose. Max's son Marks took over the house. And they started getting activity every day. They heard footsteps, doors would open on their own. Objects were moving. They saw shadows, they saw full-bodied apparitions. So the owner had a bit of experience watching some of the ghost hunting shows, and he decided to do some recording, some EVP recording with his cell phone. And one of the recordings he got was, I guess, kind of a premonition or a threat, because the recording said, "Let us help him to death." And the next day, the owner was on a ladder trying to repair something on the roof, and he felt something shake the ladder. He fell off the ladder and broke one of the vertebrae in his back. He was in the hospital for 2 months. So very, very unnerving. So he decided to actually have a professional paranormal investigation team come in called Ghost of New England Research Society, or GONERS, who actually hail from Middletown as well. So the two pictures you'll see here are some pictures from their investigation. I got these from GONERS. Mr. Kurt Knapp, who's very nice, willing to talk about it. But they have a psychic medium on their team named Karen, and she picked up a lot of, I guess you could call them, bad vibes from this well in the basement. She felt that it was a portal that was letting spirits in and out of the house. And the night of the investigation, she also got the impression that there was a child spirit there. And when they were investigating in the coal chute in the basement, she felt the presence of a child, and she actually turned around, and this handprint right here is actually the size of a child's handprint, and it looked like he'd been playing in the coal. There were no children present at the investigation, so it was very, very interesting. So they basically, they learned to live with it, and obviously they're moving out because the house is for sale now. The last thing that they experienced was the owner's wife woke up, I think, at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she heard jingling, and she saw the apparition of a lady playing with her jewelry on her bureau in her bedroom. But the lady dropped it. She walked into the bathroom and disappeared. And that was pretty much the last thing that happened. So I want to say good luck to whoever ends up buying the house, because it could be interesting. Our next legend comes from a waterfall actually in Killingworth, and those are called NINEVAH Falls. There's quite a few stories that go along with this waterfall. We're not really sure which ones are 100% true, but that's what makes these hauntings interesting, is, you know, dissecting the stories and seeing what's true and what's not. One of the first speculations was back in the before, you know, colonies had started and everything, and there was a Native American woman who had fallen deeply in love with a warrior from her tribe. Somehow it had gotten back to her that her lover had passed away in battle. So in complete despair, she threw herself over the falls. Unfortunately, the fact that he was dead was completely untrue. He was perfectly fine. He came back to the village, and when he found out what happened to his bride, he tried to throw himself over the falls as well, but luckily his companion saved him. He eventually got over his sorrow and remarried, but the ghost of the woman who threw herself over the falls is now supposed to wail in anger when people are hiking the falls at night in the moonlight. Here's just some historical photos of the falls. This is what they currently look like, and this is what they looked like, I think, in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Quite the difference, as you can see. There's another speculation. After the European colonists settled in Killingworth, there was a man that fell deeply in love with a woman that had a very psychologically attached mother. She didn't want her son moving anywhere. She wanted to keep him at home, and she didn't like the girl, so she was hell-bent on breaking them up. But he decided that he was just going to marry this girl anyways. So they got married, and nobody really knows what happened, but her body was found the day after the wedding at the bottom of the falls. So it's said now, if two lovers are hiking by the falls at night, they'll hear disembodied footsteps and hear very scary screams from this girl that passed away. Probably murdered by her mother-in-law, we'll never know. Another death associated with the falls is a lady in the 1800s was crossing the bridge in a horse-drawn buggy. Something horrible spooked the horse. She couldn't see anything, so they assumed it was something supernatural, but the horse flipped the buggy over and they both went tumbling below and they both died. And they'd say that it was something supernatural that spooked this horse. Was it? I have no idea. I guess we'll never know, but it makes a good story, and that's all that matters. Okay. All right. So another very local haunt, Russell House, Wesleyan University, High Street, Middletown, Connecticut. I used to live on High Street, and I could literally look out my bedroom window and see Russell House. Had no idea that it was haunted up until I went to see a presentation from the Thames Society of Paranormal Investigations. And it's so haunted that Wesleyan actually made a video about it, which will, it's only 5 minutes, but we'll watch it very, very soon. Here's Russell House today. And this is the man that built Russell House in 1828, Samuel Russell. He was the founder of the Russell Company, a very, very rich trading company. He had the fastest ships. I mean, it was saying that he was making money on the opium trade on the side. We don't talk about that. The Wesleyan Russell House is now the Department of Philosophy and Administrative Building. So without further ado, we're going to watch a 5-minute video about the hauntings of Russell House from Wesleyan University.
That are very creepy. If I wasn't getting paid to go in them, I wouldn't be going in them at night.
350 high, Russell House. That's definitely the most creepiest.
When you go inside, it's just old air, the vapors, and the eyes on the pictures on the wall following you. It's It's just creepy. Everything makes noise in there, but no one's in there.
Every public safety officer has had experiences at Russell House. Only 2 agreed to talk on camera.
The first night, I had to go down in the basement, and while in the basement, I hear all the noises upstairs, and I know for sure I was the one in the building.
Sometimes you hear footsteps going up the stairs, but you're the only person in the building.
And then you'll stop to make sure, you know, you're not freaking out, that it's not your footsteps echoing. But no, you'll hear like another, like 3, 4, 5 more footsteps.
When I set the alarm, if somebody wasn't there, the alarm would go off. And there's been many nights that I've heard things that sound like a person, but the alarm never goes off.
One time I tried, you know, test my nerve and, you know, say, is anyone here? And I just only heard something fall. So ever since that day, I haven't done that. I just go there and do what I have to do, try to get out.
Saybrook Russell House is a National Historic Landmark, built between 1828 and 1830 for Samuel Russell, a sea trader who founded Russell and Company, a firm to export goods from China and India. A central figure in China trade, his fast clipper ships outran English merchantmen and pirates on the China Sea. Since then, the Russell House has had many lives. Several generations of the Russell family lived in the house until it was gifted to Wesleyan University in 1937. It served as Wesleyan's Honors College and currently an administrative building. It is also speculated, but not proven, that the house was a stop on the Underground Railroad. It is over 180 years old. Over the years, there have been several accounts of voices, shadows, footsteps, and apparitions appearing to faculty, staff, and public safety officers. In response to these claims, we contacted the famed Society of Paranormal Investigations, or TSPI, to take a closer look at the house.
We're here to provide something tangible to people, something to validate their personal experiences. I'm really excited to investigate the Russell House.
For us, the biggest thing is to help people.
I think the one thing that people should know about our group is we're not for flash. We try to take a scientific approach to everything.
People that are in fear of the paranormal or don't know how to handle the paranormal, don't know what they're feeling at all. We come in, try to give them some sense of comfort.
What we do specifically when we investigate is we go into an area, we take base readings, we set up all of our camera equipment with night shot on it so we can see in the dark. We have digital voice recorders and we use digital cameras, other handheld video cameras, plus we also take EMF readings, temperature readings.
On Monday, October 20th, 2014, 3 members of TSPI and 2 members of Wesleyan staff spent the night at Russell House. The following is the result of the investigation. Throughout the night, TSPI cameras were knocked down and turned in rooms where no one was present. Footsteps were recorded and no one was walking through the building.
I just heard some footsteps.
Audio pollution was recorded while the team was in the basement.
I'd like it if you did some things for us.
Heard that now? Right before the loud noise. Can you make a noise similar to that? We don't get this kind of experience when we do, so it's good to know.
Despite the evidence collected that night, we can neither confirm nor deny the presence of the paranormal.
The campus is old. The color of the bricks doesn't help. It just looks like Halloween every time on campus.
I think Russell House stands alone. I don't mind the other buildings too much. Maybe a little bit of Olin, but Olin's so big, you know, I really think it's just the echoes, especially when you're walking in the stacks and things like that. But Russell House stands alone.
Many questions still remain. All we can do is savor the ambiguity and listen when others are asleep.
So they're not 100% sure if Russell House is haunted, but you know, I've walked by there before and gotten some oogie vibes off of it walking home from my office at night. So who knows? Doesn't really matter. It's a beautiful building and an integral part of Middletown and the Wesleyan campus. Our next place we're going to stop is actually East Haddam, Connecticut, and it has a very sinister name. It's called Devil's Hop Yard State Park. It's located on the 8 Mile River in East Haddam. It's 860 acres, and there's a beautiful waterfall in the middle of the park called Chapman Falls. It falls, I think it's 100 feet or so. I'm not 100% sure, but I can find out. Okay, so there's a couple stories about Devil's Hop Yard and how the name came to be, and it makes some great folklore. So what the pictures here are actually Chapman Falls, and then we have these strange holes that appear all in the rocks along Chapman Falls, and I'll explain to you how the theory of these holes came to be. So there was a man with the last name Dibble who lived along the banks of the 8 Mile River, and he liked to grow hops for moonshine. His hops were pretty good, and so was his moonshine. So he often had a lot of wild and crazy parties, and often young people came to these parties, which would irritate their parents, of course. So one day, a drunk young boy came back home, and his mother was so angry, she made up a rumor that Dibble was actually consorting with the devil. She said that the devil would sit on Chapman Falls and he would host his minions, witches and demons. And to try to back up her claim, she claimed that the devil actually got his tail wet, and he was so mad by getting his tail wet, he actually holes in the rocks. These holes right here. What they actually are is they're actually pools created by rocks that have been moved around for centuries inside these little stone pools. So they've created these perfectly round holes. But it makes it a good story for folklore. Even though there's a scientific explanation for the holes in the falls, there have also been some interesting things that have happened inside the park itself. People have seen strange figures in the mists in the waterfall. They've heard disembodied voices. One of the most disturbing things came from a group of teenage boys who had broken into the park after dark. Don't do that. They said that they saw some sort of unearthly figure perched upon a fence inside the state park. It pointed at them, and one of the young boys was thrown into a tree. And when he came to, he actually had 3 scratch marks on his legs that had torn through his pants. They were pretty deep and pretty raw looking, and he had no idea how they had gotten there. They weren't from the tree, so who knows? There's also been a strange beast sighted in Devil's Hop Yard. He's supposed to be large and shaggy, and he's got the face of a skull, and he's got very, very scary horns. So I don't know, maybe it's all, it's all a legend, maybe it's all folklore, but it makes a great story. And like I said, it's a great park to hike and fish in, and if it is haunted, just stay out of there at night, you'll be fine. Okay. Just literally right down the road from Devil's Hop Yard is Gillette Castle, also another state park in East Haddam, Connecticut. Gillette Castle was built in 1919 by William Hooker Gillette. William Hooker Gillette was an actor. He was actually a relative of Thomas Hooker, the founder of Hartford. The castle itself took 5 years to build, and it's unique because it's filled with a bunch of secret rooms and passages that Gillette actually constructed because he had learned so much creating tricks for the stage when he was an actor. This is actually a picture of him playing Sherlock Holmes, and this was in 1905 at the Dukes of York Theatre in London. He's got the pipe there and the robe. This is what the castle looks like today. I'm not sure if it's open right now because of the pandemic, but if they do open for Christmas, I highly recommend visiting. They put a million decorations out. They have carolers out. They have hot chocolate. You can wander the grounds. It's really a beautiful sight to see. And this is actually what the castle looked like. I think, judging by the car, probably in the 1930s, 40s. Are some interesting occurrences that occur at Gillette Castle. People who work at the castle say they've seen his ghost dressed as Sherlock Holmes wandering the castle at night. Another person has said that they've seen the gardener that had passed away for the mansion still trying to tend the gardens outside. People have felt cold spots, and some ghost hunters say that ghosts will make the air cold when they're trying to draw energy from it to manifest themselves. And then hikers and campers who are camping in the surrounding forest in the off season say that they've seen figures in the windows. And the castle is closed, minding its Christmas celebration in the winter. So, well, very strange. Okay. Our next place is Abigail's Grill and Wine Bar, and that's located in Simsbury. It's the only restaurant that I know of that's actually named after a ghost. Originally known as the Pettibone Tavern, it was built in 1780 by a gentleman named John Pettibone, who was a whaling captain. The Pettibone Tavern is extremely historically significant. There were several meetings there about battles in the Revolutionary War. Harriet Beecher Stowe did some of her writing there. In fact, it was a very common spot for people running the Revolutionary War, traveling from Albany to Boston. One of the creepier things about Abigail's is that it was actually used for cold storage for bodies in the winter when the ground was too frozen to bury them. So that might explain some of the weird things that happen there. Nobody's really sure. But this is what Abigail's looks like today. And this is what it looked like. I think this is probably from the early 1900s or so. So looks pretty similar. Obviously we're missing the parking lot and the white fence, but it's a nice, quaint little classic New England building. Famous historical figures have visited Abigail's. There was a meeting between Captain Phelps of Simsbury, and he met with the Green Mountain Boys of Vermont to learn to discuss the plan to take Fort Ticonderoga, which is also haunted in New York. And like I said, Harriet Beecher Stowe often stopped there to write as well. So very historically significant, interesting place to visit. Okay, so now to the ghostly part. So John Pettibone was obviously out at sea a lot because he was a whaling captain. And one day he came home to find his wife in bed with another man. And obviously he wasn't happy about that, so he got very angry, and unfortunately he chopped his wife's head off, as well as her lover's. And this picture right here is actually a portrait of Abigail that hangs in the foyer in the restaurant now. And this little piece I have circled here, John was so angry as to what his wife did, he actually ripped her head off of all the portraits in the tavern that were painted of her. So this painting was actually recovered in the 1970s and put back together. So that little line right there is where it was told. In terms of paranormal activity, they're not sure who exactly is haunting Pettibone Tavern. I mean, it could be Abigail, but they've also heard a child laughing. So the lights turn on and off. They actually had a chair that was just sitting up in the office, and it just kind of exploded and splintered into a million pieces. They've heard disembodied voices. They've also had candles relight after they've, blown them out, which these aren't the trick candles. They're the normal ones that you have on a table while you're eating dinner at a restaurant. So that can be dangerous if you think about it. But, if it is Abigail, I hope she eventually finds rest. If you want to go and visit Abigail's, they're open 7 days a week. They have great food and great drinks as well in a beautiful building. Lake Compounce in Bristol, Connecticut is actually one of the oldest amusement parks in the United States. Lake Compounce was actually named after Chief Compound, who was of the Tonsis tribe. And unfortunately, Chief Compound passed away. He drowned crossing the lake in a brass kettle in 1694. There are some speculations as to why this happened. The theories are it was because he was upset that he had sold a bunch of land to settlers, and the sum of money that he got it for it was extremely minuscule for the time. And they said he drowned himself because of it. Others say it was an accident. And then others say it was actually a murder by the rest of his tribe because they were so mad at him for selling land to these settlers. Nobody will really know. So it opened up in 1864 as an amusement park. This isn't from 1864. This is probably 1930, 1940, but this is what it looks like now. I think they're closed for coronavirus, if I remember correctly. But the amusement park it has a lot of death associated with it, unfortunately. There's been a lot of just freak accidents and weird things that have happened in the amusement parks. There's been drownings in the lake. There's been construction accidents. There have been people killed on the roller coasters and the rides. There was a little boy killed in 2004 by a random tree limb that just decided to fall on him. It's pretty horrifying. And they just think that all of these deaths have something to do with maybe Lake Compounce being cursed. Nobody really knows. There's also a ton of paranormal activity at Lake Compounce. Most of it takes place in the ballroom, which is one of the original parts of the amusement park. Dark shapes have been seen. They've heard strange music, even though there's no party going on. Disembodied voices, objects moving, lights turning on and off. A lot of the nighttime security guards hate being there at night just because it's so creepy. So nobody knows, if it's paranormal activity or not, or is it a curse? I don't know. But, if you decide to go visit Lake Compounce next summer, just remember to watch yourself because it could be cursed. Okay. Our next one is going to take us back to Deep River, Connecticut. And we're going to talk about the grave of XYZ, which is one of my favorite mysteries of the state. On December 13th of 1899, 4 people decided to pull off a robbery of the Deep River Savings Bank, which is now the Citizens Bank in Deep River. The manager of the bank had heard through the grapevine that he knew that there was going to be a bank heist. So he actually hired a really great security guard named Captain Harry Tyler. It was a good thing because on that evening, the 4 robbers were trying to break into Deep River Savings Bank, and Harry Tyler caught them. He shot at them, and all 4 were running, but only 3 got away because he killed one of them. The man was taken to the morgue. Nobody claimed him. There was no identification. So it was decided that this man was going to be buried in the Fountain Hill Cemetery in a donated plot. Well, a couple months later, Mr. Tyler received a letter penned into what looked like to be the handwriting of a woman, asking that the man be buried in a grave simply marked with XYZ. And since then, for 40 years, every year in December, a woman in black would get off the Deep River station, and she would lay a wreath on top of this gravestone that was labeled XYZ. She didn't talk to anybody. She pretty much just laid her wreath, stood there for a few minutes, got back on the train, and left. Nobody knew who she was or what her relationship was to this bank robber. But these 2 items that are on the screen right now are actually on display at the Citizens Bank in Deep River. If you ever want to kind of check those out, this is actually a photo of Harry Tyler, the security guard who killed XYZ. And here's actually the shell casing of the bullet that killed XYZ. So, sorry, very, very interesting. And I will probably come down there at some point to check those out. Okay. So there is a legend, of course, that goes along with the grave of XYZ. And the legend says if you say XYZ over his grave 3 times quickly, that'll haunt you. And some leave a few coins offering so his spirit won't follow you. So that's why the grave is XYZ is always covered with coins. It's also said that the woman in black's spirit is also seen standing over the gravestone on moonlit nights in December. So it's very interesting, and you have a ghost and a mystery, which is a great mix. Okay. Another local haunt, very famous house, the Mark Twain House in Hartford, Connecticut. Beautiful building, beautiful building. I don't know if you've ever been inside, but I highly recommend it. This is what the house looks like right now. And this is the house probably in the late 1800s, I'm assuming. It was built in 1873, and it was sold in 1903 because Clemens or Mark Twain unfortunately ran into financial issues. But he wrote most of his more famous work there, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, etc., etc. Unfortunately, oh, geez, sorry, that was my my stand I put my phone on. Obviously, Twain passed away. It was bought by the Royal Society and underwent a major renovation to become a museum in 1999. And this is what it looks like right now. One second. So there's always been paranormal activity at the Mark Twain House, but the staff were discouraged from talking about it because they were afraid it would scare visitors away. But the paranormal activity is a variety of things. One of the most prevalent ones, the smell of cigar smoke, is all over the building, even though there were no cigars lit. But Twain himself was known to smoke at least 20 cigars a day, which can't be healthy. But they hear footsteps, they hear doors slamming, they've heard disembodied voices, people have had their jewelry tugged on. One of the weirdest things was the very responsible and respectful facilities director was vacuuming one of the rooms one night. And he had walked away to pick something up, and when he turned around, somebody had knotted his vacuum cleaner cord all up to the point he couldn't pull it apart, and there was nobody else in the building. So very, very interesting. There's a full-bodied apparition of a woman in period clothing that's thought to be Susie, Mark Twain's daughter. She unfortunately passed away in the house on Christmas from meningitis, so very, very sad. And this is a video right now, actually. The house was featured on the television program on Sci-Fi Channel, Ghost Hunters. And I'm not really a huge fan of these shows, whatnot, but they did catch something kind of interesting. They were in the room below the room that had a pool table in it. So I'm going to actually fast forward to the part, it's a long episode, so just give me one moment. 20.
Reflecting on the wall. The only way we could recreate it was from walking from the master bedroom towards Susie's room, which was one of the reports.
Right, yeah.
Of the woman doing that.
Yeah.
Now, that blew my mind. That, okay, if I walk the same path as this supposed spirit, it creates the anomaly that I saw.
Right.
At one point, Dustin and Brett, two of our investigators, were up on the second floor, and they were just looking around, trying to see if they could make contact with anything. And there was some sort of a bang, almost sounds like a ball falling to the floor and rolling. Lucky enough to catch audio, so we do have that, and we'd like to play it. Get your take, see if you've ever heard anything. You spend a lot more time here than us. Tell us if it's something that you usually hear in the house or not.
Okay.
What was that? Did you hear that sound?
Yes.
What was that?
Now you would know better than us with that.
So, to me, that sounds like a rack of pool balls moving around or a pool ball dropping. So I don't know. So it was very interesting. And like I said, I'm not really a huge fan of these shows, but I thought that was interesting. But something to think about. Mark Twain House is open right now, and they actually have their graveyard shift ghost tours. Very enjoyable, fun evening, beautiful house. I highly encourage checking it out. Okay, I think the last stop on our little Haunted Connecticut tour is actually the Old State House in Hartford, Connecticut. Unfortunately, it's currently closed because of the pandemic. But the State House was designed and completed by an architect named Charles Bulfinch in 1796, and remains one of the oldest state houses in the country that's still operating. This is, I think the photo was 1898 or something, and this is what it looks like today. But the interesting thing is that the American painter Joseph Stewart decided that he was going to turn the third floor of the State House into an art studio. And they said it was fine as long as he would paint portraits of the people in the assembly to line the walls with. So he did that. Besides being a painter, he also collected oddities. So there's actually a whole room on the third floor that is called the Joseph Stewart Oddities Museum. Just checking the chat. Okay. Sorry about that. So in this Oddities Museum, there's a bunch of different interesting things. There's a calf with 2 heads. There's a pig with 2 heads. There's animals that have grown to unnatural sizes. There's machines that he invented with no known use. Just very interesting. This is only half of the collection because after he died in 1822, half of his collection actually disappeared. So nobody knows what happened to it. Now, in terms of paranormal activity, this has been going on for years. A lot of it occurs around the outside of the museum. They heard footsteps on the stairs to the museum, so they don't know if it's Joseph Stewart just checking up on his collection. They see figures in the windows from the outside when the building is closed. They've even heard the sounds of a meeting assembly in the legislative chamber when nobody's there. So this could be just a residual haunting, could be a bunch of different things, but a kind of dark and macabre fact about the State House is actually it was the site of the first execution for witchcraft in the United States. Everybody thinks that Salem, Massachusetts in 1692 had the first witches that were executed. Actually, it occurred in Hartford, Connecticut, and the woman was named Alice Young, and I think she was 57 or so, but she was hung on the grounds of the Old State House, and that might explain some of the haunting. And that's supposed to be a painting of her there. And she was the first person to be executed for witchcraft in the colonies. Okay, so that pretty much sums up the presentation. I timed that pretty well. It was about an hour. So I'm going to open up the chat now for questions. Q&A too. Tom asked, is the house over by Middlesex Hospital? It's kind of close to Middlesex Hospital. It's on High Street above Middlesex Hospital. If you're coming up Route 66 and you have the veteran screen on the left, it's across from the veteran screen on High Street. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I'm going over questions. All right. Okay, all right. So if anybody has questions, please do ask them in the chat. Okay.
I think Peggy had a question. If she could type it in the chat, that would be fantastic. Any additional questions? You can use the question and answer or the chat function.
Okay. All right. If you're not thinking of questions, perfectly fine. If you want to follow my spooky stuff, Jasana Levy asked, you mentioned the event at the Mark Twain House. Are there events at other places? It depends on really where you go. I would check their Facebook pages. I would check their you know, their websites and right now, everything is kind of screwy right now because of COVID. All the state parks are open. So if you want to visit Devil's Trap Yard, if you want to walk the grounds of Gillette Castle, that's perfectly fine. Peggy asked, which location has the most paranormal activity? That's a good question. I mean, from what I've seen, I think the Daniel Raney house seems to be the most, and you know what I've seen on the show and whatnot, but unfortunately that's not open to the public. How do I get leads for these stories and folklore? Oh, that's a very, very good question, Jen. So you can always go to the internet, but you have to think of it as everybody has access to the internet. What I do is I own 50 or so books about New England legends and folklore. And I usually pull the information from those just because the authors are credible. They're often historians and they have more time to do research. So there's Haunted Connecticut, there's New England Ghosts and Legends. You know, just head over to the Wesleyan bookstore. They have a great selection actually in the basement there. What is your favorite place you've been to that's haunted? That's a good question. So back when I was a ghost hunter, if you will, I actually went down to a haunted sanatorium back in 2018 with my group, People versus Paranormal. Huge turn of the century sanatorium for the, you know, people that were mentally ill back in the 1800s. Huge, so we got to stay there all night. We got to investigate. Incredibly creepy building. Really, really fun. Incredibly scary. But that was a once in a lifetime thing to do, and I think it was in Radford, Virginia, if I remember correctly. Any spiritual things related directly to the Connecticut River? The only thing I can think of is the shad spirit. And that was basically a Native American legend that when you would see the shad appear as a spirit, the shad would come and you'd be able to fish them. I know that there's another one called the something lotus as well. I can find out for you if you want to shoot me an email, but I know there's something about a river lotus as well. We have one in the Q&A. Ancient Aliens covered a story of the pagan site in New London area. Any info on that? I assume you're talking about the Gungy Wop. I don't have a lot of information on that, but we actually covered that for our podcast, New England Legends. And I can find that. Sorry. The haunting in Connecticut regarding the house in Southington, do you have any additional information about that? I do. So I didn't cover that because a lot of these places that are featured in these films, the owners, they get a lot of harassment, like random people just knocking on their doors and everything to take pictures and whatnot of their house. But I basically sat in on an interview with the Warrens at one point to talk about what happened at the haunting in Connecticut. And there was a lot of, sometimes the stories were skewed and, you know, people, they couldn't quite get their story straight, but, you know, there's definitely something that might have gone on there, but the current owners, they haven't experienced anything. So, have I been to Lottie's Woods? I have not. This actually, I find out in an author I work with as a client. His name is Zachary Lamoth, and he wrote a book called Connecticut Lore. And that is actually featured in the book, Connecticut Lore, which, as I said, always go to the authors first to find out your information. But I'd love to check it out at some point and just wander the woods there. It's beautiful. If anybody else has any questions, I actually have a little bit of trivia, and we're going to do a giveaway quickly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to ask a question, and the first person in the chat that answers it correctly will actually win a spooktarium, as I call them. When I am not doing digital marketing or researching creepy stuff, I like to work with plants. So you'll actually get a little terrarium that I will mail to you with creepy little things like gravestones and creepy little succulents and moss in it. And all you have to do is answer this question correctly. So is everybody ready? Okay. What?
You want me to go get it?
Oh, no, that's okay. Okay. how many times do you have to see the black dog in order for it to signal death? Whoa, Sharon Lewis! Wow! Wow, that was fast.
That was really fast.
Damn. Okay, Sharon Lewis wins, and I know you, Sharon, so that works out good. Okay, so I will message you by email because I have your email address, and I will mail you the Spookterrium. I want to say thank you, everybody, so much for coming. It was really, really enjoyable. If you ever want to talk about spooky stuff, I have a Facebook page for all things spooky, Spectre Scribe. You can follow me on Instagram, the New England Spectre Scribe, spectrescribe.com. The podcast is ournewlegends.com, and shameless plug for citymarketing.com. It looks like we have one more. Ooh, Scott asked, have I found anything on Dudleytown and Cornwall? I have never been to Dudleytown. There are some very overprotective people that live on the road to Dudleytown, and they will definitely call the cops if they even see you drive by. But I've heard it's a very creepy place, and there's some great folklore that goes along with it. Okay. The answer was 3, so it is so funny. All right, well, all
right, Lauren, thank you so much. This was so much fun. It was definitely something different, so we so appreciate you taking the time of learning so much more about the great scares of Connecticut. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate it. I hope everyone has a great night and a great Halloween weekend.
Okay. All right. Happy Halloween, everybody. Bye.